The cold stone bench felt like ice against my legs, even through my thin dress. 11 o'clock at night, and Oak Street was empty except for the occasional car passing by, headlights cutting through the darkness before disappearing again. I pulled my cardigan tighter around my shoulders, trying to stop the shivering that had nothing to do with the October chill. "We'll pick you up after the reception, Mom. Just wait at the bus stop on Oak Street." Sarah's words echoed in my mind. My daughter, my only child, the girl I'd raised alone after her father died when she was just 5 years old. Have you ever waited for someone who never came? Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything about how I see family. And if this resonates with you, subscribe. You'll want to know how this ends. I checked my phone again. Dead. I'd forgotten to charge it last night. Too busy pressing my simple dress, the one I'd bought from JCPenney for $89. Sarah had told me not to spend too much. "It's just a wedding, Mom. Don't go overboard." Just a wedding. Her wedding. I closed my eyes and let myself remember. 35 years of memories flooded back, starting with that awful day when John collapsed in the kitchen, leaving me with a 5-year-old daughter and a stack of medical bills that would take me years to pay off. I'd worked 2 jobs after that. Waitress during the day at Miller's Diner, cleaning crew at night at the office buildings downtown. Sarah never went without breakfast, never wore hand-me-downs if I could help it. I'd learned to survive on 4 hours of sleep, learned to smile through the exhaustion, learned to ignore the ache in my back and the way my hands cramped from scrubbing floors. When Sarah turned 15, she wanted to take piano lessons. All her friends were taking them, she said. I picked up weekend shifts. When she needed a dress for junior prom, I stayed up 3 nights in a row sewing it by hand, using a pattern from the library and fabric I'd bought on sale. She looked beautiful in it. The boy who took her, Tommy Richardson, told her she looked like a princess. College was harder. Sarah got into a good school upstate, but the scholarships didn't cover everything. I sold the house, the little 2-bedroom I'd inherited from my mother. It wasn't much, but it was mine, paid off, the only security I had. The money went into Sarah's college fund. I moved into a small apartment on the east side, the kind with thin walls where you could hear your neighbors arguing at 2 a.m. I slept on the sofa so Sarah could have the bedroom when she came home for holidays. Then there was Walter, kind, patient Walter, who owned the hardware store on Main Street. He'd asked me to marry him when Sarah was a sophomore in college. I'd wanted to say yes. God, I'd wanted to. But Sarah didn't like him. She said he was too old-fashioned, that she couldn't see him as a father figure. So I'd told Walter no, watching his face fall, knowing I was giving up my last chance at companionship. I believed that love always comes back. I thought Sarah would remember all of this someday. A young couple walked past the bus stop, wrapped up in each other, laughing. They didn't even glance my way. I pulled my cardigan tighter. The trouble started 6 months before the wedding. Sarah had called, her voice bright with excitement. "Mom, Brandon proposed." Brandon Miller, lawyer, from one of those families with old money and a house in Connecticut. I'd met him exactly once, briefly when Sarah brought him home for Christmas the year before. He'd been polite but distant, the way people are when they're being civil, but not particularly interested. "Oh, honey, that's wonderful," I'd said, genuinely happy for her. "Tell me everything. When did he took me to this amazing restaurant, Mom. There was a violinist and everything. The ring is gorgeous, 2 carats. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart. We're thinking June wedding. I have so much to plan." "I can help," I'd offered immediately. "I'm good with flowers. I could help with arrangements or the favors or—" There was a pause, a long one. "That's sweet, Mom, but Brandon's mother is handling everything. She has better taste. You know, she's done this before. She knows all the vendors, the good venues. It's just easier this way." I'd swallowed the hurt, forced brightness into my voice. "Of course, sweetheart. Whatever you want. It's your special day." I should have seen it then. The distance. The careful way she was already pulling away. The wedding invitations arrived 3 months later. I'd been so excited to see it, to see my name printed in elegant script. But when I opened it, my name wasn't there. Mr. and Mrs. Richard Miller requests the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, Brandon James Miller, to Sarah Elizabeth Wilson. Their son. Not her parents and his parents. Just his parents. I'd called Sarah, trying to keep my voice steady. Honey, I think there might be a mistake with the invitation. My name isn't... Oh, that. Yeah, Mom, it's just how Brandon's family does things. Traditional, you know? The groom's parents host. It's formal, don't worry about it. But I'm your mother. I know that, Mom. Everyone knows that. It's just paper. It doesn't mean anything. But it did mean something. It meant I was being erased before the wedding even happened. The day before the wedding, I'd driven 3 hours to the venue, a beautiful estate in Connecticut with manicured lawns and gardens that probably cost more to maintain than I made in a year. I'd bought a simple dress, navy blue, modest. I'd had my hair done at a salon, spending more than I should have, wanting to look nice for my daughter's big day. When I arrived at the reception hall for the rehearsal dinner, I couldn't find my name at any of the family tables. I'd walked around twice, checking and rechecking. Finally, I found it. Table 18, in the back corner near the bathrooms, seated with people I'd never met, people who turned out to be distant colleagues of Brandon's father. I'd sat through that dinner with a smile frozen on my face, watching Sarah laugh and glow at the head table, surrounded by Brandon's family. His mother, Catherine Miller, was elegant in cream silk, holding court, her hand possessively on Sarah's arm. At one point, someone asked Catherine about the bride's family, and Catherine had smiled and said, "Oh, Sarah's mother is here somewhere." Somewhere. Like I was a coat check ticket she'd misplaced. The wedding itself was beautiful. Sarah looked radiant in her white gown, the one Catherine had taken her to buy in Manhattan. I'd offered to go dress shopping with her, but Sarah had said, "Catherine already made the appointment, Mom. It's at this exclusive boutique. They only take people they know." During the ceremony, I'd sat in the third row, not the first where mothers typically sit. The first row was for Brandon's parents and his grandmother. I was in the third row between Brandon's uncle from Chicago and a family friend I'd never met. When the officiant said, "Who gives this woman to be married?" Brandon's father had stood. Sarah had kissed his cheek. No one looked at me. The reception was worse. I'd found my name at the seating chart, table 22 this time, even farther back. I'd made my way through the crowd, past the beautiful centerpieces and the elegant place settings, to a table in the very back corner. That's when I'd seen it. Table 6, the family table. And there, laughing with Sarah and Brandon, was a woman I didn't recognize. Blonde, polished, about 60. She had her arm around Sarah's shoulders. When I'd asked a waiter who she was, he'd said, "Oh, that's Mrs. Catherine Hayes. She's like a second mother to the bride. They're very close." A second mother. I'd watched the toasts. Brandon's father spoke about welcoming Sarah into their family. Catherine spoke about how Sarah had brought joy into their lives. Brandon's best man made jokes about Brandon finally settling down. Sarah's maid of honor talked about college memories. No one mentioned me, not once. When it was time for the mother-son dance, Catherine and Brandon waltzed beautifully to "What a Wonderful World." I'd waited for the mother-daughter dance. I'd even picked out a song in my head just in case. "You Are My Sunshine," the one I used to sing to Sarah when she was little. But there was no mother-daughter dance. The DJ went straight from the mother-son dance to the anniversary dance. I'd sat at table 22 alone, everyone else at my table having gotten up to mingle, and I'd felt myself disappearing. Actually disappearing, like I was fading into the wallpaper. Sarah had found me as the reception was winding down. She'd looked flushed and happy, her veil slightly askew, her lipstick worn off. "Mom!" She'd kissed my cheek quickly. "Thanks for coming. Listen, we're heading straight to the airport after this. Honeymoon in Bali, remember?" "I remember. Have a wonderful time, sweetheart." "Oh, and Mom..." She'd glanced back at Brandon, who was waiting by the exit. We arranged a ride for you. Just wait at the bus stop on Oak Street. Someone will pick you up and drive you back to the hotel, okay? I'd nodded, not trusting my voice. Okay, great. Love you, Mom. Bye. And she was gone, swept away in a swirl of white silk and champagne bubbles and Catherine Miller's possessive embrace. I'd made my way to Oak Street, found the bus stop, and sat down to wait. That was at 10 o'clock. Now it was past midnight. 12:30. 1 o'clock. 1:30. A police cruiser slowed down and the officer rolled down his window. Ma'am, you okay? I'd straightened up, smoothed my dress. I'm fine, officer. Just waiting for a ride. It's pretty late. You sure someone's coming? Yes, my daughter arranged it. He'd looked at me for a long moment, something like pity in his eyes. Okay, you stay safe. 2 o'clock. The last bus of the night came rumbling down Oak Street. I'd stood up, waving my hand, but the driver hadn't even slowed. It wasn't an official stop, I realized. Just a bench, not even a real bus stop. 2:30. My back was screaming. The cold had seeped into my bones. I'd pulled my phone out again, uselessly. Still dead. 3 o'clock. I'd given up. I'd stood, my legs stiff and aching, and started walking. 3 miles back to the cheap motel where I'd booked a room, the only place I could afford on my budget. I'd walk slowly, my good shoes rubbing blisters on my heels, my cardigan useless against the pre-dawn chill. A few cars had passed, none stopped. When I finally made it back to the motel, the sun was just starting to lighten the sky. I'd fumbled with my key card, let myself into the small, dingy room, and sat on the edge of the bed. I didn't cry. I was too numb for that. I just sat there, still in my $89 dress, watching the sun come up through the thin curtains. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor back home, had asked me the next afternoon when I'd gotten back. Margaret, how was the wedding? You must be so proud. I'd opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. I just nodded and hurried into my apartment, closing the door on her concerned face. 3 months passed. I'd called Sarah 5 times. Every call went to voicemail. Hi, honey, just checking in. How was Bali? Call me when you get a chance. No response. Sarah, it's Mom. Haven't heard from you. Hope everything's okay. Love you. Nothing. I'd tried texting. Short, casual messages. Thinking of you, sweetheart. Hope you're settling into married life. Would love to hear how you're doing. Red receipts showed she'd seen them, but no replies came. Her birthday came in November. I'd sent a card, one of those nice ones from Hallmark with a handwritten note inside. Happy birthday, my dear girl. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Love always, Mom. No thank you. No acknowledgement, nothing. By December, I'd started to understand. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't Sarah being busy with newlywed life. This was intentional. I was being phased out. Quietly. Cleanly. No confrontation. No explanation. Just silence. Christmas came. I'd gotten an email, not even a call, from Sarah's new email address, the one with Brandon's last name attached. Mom, we're spending Christmas with Brandon's family this year. Hope you understand. We'll catch up soon. XO Sarah. No invitation. No maybe next year. Just exclusion. I'd sat in my apartment on Christmas Eve, looking at the small tree I'd bought from the grocery store. I decorated it by myself, hanging the ornaments Sarah had made in elementary school, the ones I'd saved all these years. The paper snowflake from first grade, the clay handprint from kindergarten, the macaroni wreath from second grade. I'd made chicken noodle soup from a can and eaten it with saltine crackers, watching a Christmas movie on TV, the volume low so I wouldn't disturb the neighbors. On Christmas morning, I'd opened Facebook. A mistake. I shouldn't have, but I did. Sarah's page was full of photos. Sarah and Brandon in matching Christmas pajamas. Sarah laughing with Catherine by an enormous Christmas tree. Sarah opening presents in what looked like a mansion. The caption read, "So blessed to have such an amazing family. Best Christmas ever." The comments were full of heart emojis and congratulations. You two are adorable. That tree is gorgeous. What a beautiful family. I'd scrolled through 30 photos. 30. Not one of them included me. Not one of them mentioned me. No comment that said, "Wish your mom could be here." No tag, no acknowledgement. I'd closed my laptop and sat very still. I'd felt something inside me crack, like ice breaking on a frozen lake. It was like I'd never existed, like 35 years of sacrifice and love and sleepless nights and skipped meals and sold houses had simply evaporated, like I was a rough draft that had been revised out of the final version of Sarah's life. I'd walked to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. Really looked. I'd seen a 68-year-old woman with gray hair and tired eyes and lines around her mouth from years of forcing smiles. I'd seen someone who'd made herself small, smaller, smallest, until she'd disappeared completely. I'd whispered to my reflection, when did I become invisible? But I'd known the answer. I'd been disappearing for years, shrinking bit by bit every time I'd said, "Whatever you want, sweetheart," instead of, "This is what I need." Every time I'd accepted less because I was afraid asking for more would push her away. Every time I'd swallowed my hurt because making waves might make me lose her. I'd lost her anyway. That night, I dreamed about the bus stop, about sitting there in the cold, waiting, always waiting, about watching cars pass by, none of them stopping, about the sun coming up while I sat alone, still waiting. I'd woken up with the certainty of what I'd known all along, but had been too afraid to admit. Sarah wasn't coming back for me. She'd left me at that bus stop, and in every metaphorical way that mattered, I was still there, still waiting, still hoping, still disappearing. The new year came. January, February, March. Not a single phone call, not one text, nothing. I'd stopped calling, stopped texting. What was the point? I was shouting into a void, and the void had nothing to say back. On a cold Tuesday in March, 6 months after the wedding, I'd gone to physical therapy for the back pain that had gotten worse since that night at the bus stop. The therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Helen Martinez, had noticed I was crying while she worked on my lower back. "Margaret," she'd said gently, pausing her hands, "you're carrying so much tension here. What's weighing on you?" And just like that, after months of holding it in, I'd broken. The tears had come in ugly, gasping sobs. "My daughter," I'd choked out. "My daughter forgot me." Dr. Helen had stopped working on my back. She'd pulled up a stool and sat beside the treatment table, looking at me with eyes that held no judgment, only compassion. "Forgot you?" she'd asked softly. "Or chose to exclude you?" I'd frozen. No one had said it out loud before, not like that, not so plainly. She's just busy. Newlywed life, you know? "Margaret." Dr. Helen's voice was firm but kind. "Tell me something. If a stranger treated you the way your daughter has treated you, would you accept it?" I'd opened my mouth to defend Sarah the way I always did. But then I'd stopped. Would I accept it from a stranger? Someone who left me waiting in the cold? Someone who didn't return my calls? Someone who erased me from their life without explanation? "No," I'd whispered, "I wouldn't." "Then why do you accept it from her?" I'd had no answer. Dr. Helen had squeezed my hand and let me cry. When I'd gotten home that evening, I'd felt something shift. Not anger, exactly. Not yet. Just a tiny crack in the wall I'd built around the truth. I'd walked through my small apartment, really seeing it for the first time in months. The photos of Sarah everywhere. School pictures from kindergarten through college. Sarah at her high school graduation. Sarah at her college graduation. Sarah, Sarah, Sarah. Not one picture of me. Not one of us together after she'd turned 18. She'd always been the one behind the camera, or she'd said she didn't like taking photos, or she'd been too busy. I'd opened my closet and pulled down a cardboard box from the top shelf. It was dusty, taped shut, labeled in my own handwriting, "Sarah's Things." I hadn't looked inside in years. The tape resisted, then gave way. Inside were layers of memory, report cards with gold stars and teacher comments. Sarah is a joy to have in class. Excellent student. Pleasure to teach. Underneath those were cards. Mother's Day cards Sarah had made in elementary school, construction paper and glitter and crayon drawings. I love you, Mom. You're the best mom ever. My hero, my mom, above a stick figure drawing of me with a cape. I'd trace the crayon lines with my finger, remembering 7-year-old Sarah presenting it to me with such pride. When had that girl disappeared? When had I become someone not worth a phone call? I dug deeper. There were photos. Sarah on her first day of kindergarten, holding my hand, looking nervous. Sarah at her piano recital, age 12. Me standing proud beside her. Sarah and me at her high school graduation, her arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. We'd looked happy. We'd been happy. At the bottom of the box, I'd found papers. Financial documents I'd kept because I never threw anything important away. A loan statement from the bank. $15,000 borrowed against my mother's house for Sarah's college expenses. Balance remaining. $8,327. I was still paying it off, 68 years old, still sending money every month for an education that had launched a life I was no longer part of. Beneath that was a medical bill, 10 years old, a letter from a surgeon's office recommending a procedure for my back. Estimated cost, $12,000 after insurance. I'd canceled it. The money had gone into Sarah's college fund instead. That's when the chronic pain had started. I'd sat on the floor of my closet, surrounded by evidence of my own erasure. I'd given everything. My house, my health, my chance at love with Walter, my comfort, my security, my future. And Sarah had taken it all as if it were her due. No, worse than that. She'd taken it and then decided I wasn't worth keeping around. I'd looked up at the mirror on the back of the closet door. In the dim light, I could see myself. 68 years old, gray hair that needed cutting. Clothes from Target and thrift stores, deep lines around my mouth and eyes. Thin, because I still skipped meals sometimes, old habits dying hard. Stooped shoulders from years of carrying burdens I'd chosen to carry. When did I disappear? I'd whispered to my reflection. But even as I'd asked it, I'd known. I'd been disappearing for decades. Every time I'd said yes when I'd meant no. Every time I'd made myself smaller to make room for Sarah's needs. Every time I'd believed that sacrifice was the same as love. I'd given everything, but Sarah had never asked if I had anything left. She'd never even thought to ask. The realization had hit me like cold water. I didn't need her to acknowledge me. I needed to acknowledge myself. I'd stood up slowly, my back protesting. I'd closed the box and put it back on the shelf. Then I'd walked to my tiny kitchen table, pulled out a notepad, and written 3 words. Live for me. Not a plan, not yet, just a direction. For the first time in 35 years, I was going to point my life toward myself instead of toward my daughter. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't send an angry email. I didn't demand an apology or an explanation. What would be the point? You can't force someone to see you if they've decided you're invisible. Instead, I made a decision. Quiet, firm, irreversible. I was going to live for me now. The first step came a week later. I'd been sitting in my apartment looking at my phone at Sarah's number in my contacts. My thumb had hovered over it so many times in the past months, wanting to call, wanting to hear her voice, wanting to pretend everything was fine. But everything wasn't fine, and calling her would only hurt more. I'd gone to the phone store the next day and gotten a new number. The young man helping me had asked if I wanted to keep my old one, and I'd said no. Clean break. I didn't tell Sarah. I didn't announce it. If she wanted to find me, she'd have to try. The following week, I'd deleted my Facebook account. Not deactivated, deleted. I'd sat with my finger over the button for a long moment, thinking about the years of photos, the connections, the way I'd used it to keep track of Sarah's life from a distance. Then I'd thought about those Christmas photos, about being erased from her narrative while having to watch her life continue without me. I'd pressed delete. If she wants to find me, she'll have to try. 2 weeks after that revelation in Dr. Helen's office, I'd gone back to the doctor. Not for my back this time, but for a full physical, my first one in 5 years. Dr. Patel had been gentle but direct. "Margaret, you have osteoporosis. Pretty advanced. Your bone density is concerning. And you're underweight. Have you been eating properly?" I'd thought about all the times I'd eaten ramen or canned soup to save money. All the times I'd skipped meals because groceries were expensive and Sarah had needed something. "I'm eating better now," I'd said. It wasn't quite true yet, but it would be. Dr. Patel had prescribed calcium supplements and vitamin D. She'd given me information about nutrition. As I'd left, she'd touched my arm and said, "Margaret, you need to take care of yourself. Who else will?" I'd stopped in the parking lot, her words echoing in my head. Who else will? For so long, the answer had been nobody, because Sarah needs me to take care of her. But Sarah didn't need me anymore. Sarah didn't want me at all. The answer now was different, simpler, truer. "Me," I'd said out loud, standing in that parking lot, the spring sun warm on my face, "I will." A month into my quiet revolution, I'd noticed a flyer at the grocery store. Senior Community Center, new members welcome, book club, crafts, exercise classes, and coffee every Thursday. I'd taken a photo of it with my phone, thought about it for 3 days. Then, on a Thursday morning, I'd driven to the community center. The building was small but cheerful, with bright blue doors and flower boxes under the windows. Inside, it smelled like coffee and vanilla air freshener. A woman about my age with short silver hair and a warm smile had greeted me at the front desk. "First time here? I'm Linda. Welcome." "I'm Margaret. I saw the flyer about the book club." "Oh, perfect. They're meeting right now in the back room. Go on in. Don't be shy. This group is lovely." I'd walked to the back room, my heart pounding with nervousness I hadn't felt in years. Through the doorway, I could see about 8 women sitting in a circle, coffee cups in hand, laughing about something. One of them had looked up and seen me. "Well, don't just stand there, honey. Come on in. We don't bite. I'm Dorothy." Dorothy was round and cheerful, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She'd patted the empty chair next to her, and I'd sat down. "We're just talking about the book, but honestly, we spend more time gossiping than discussing literature." Dorothy had grinned. "What's your name?" "Margaret." "Welcome, Margaret. This is Rose. That's Betty, Jean, Patricia, Carol, Susan, and Linda just came back from getting more coffee. You read this month's book?" I'd shaken my head. "I just found out about the group today." "No matter. We'll catch you up. Fair warning, though, we talk about more than books here. This is where we come to be real with each other. Sometimes that gets heavy." Over coffee and store-bought cookies, I'd learned their stories. Dorothy's son lived 2 hours away and visited twice a year, if she was lucky. Rose's daughter had stopped speaking to her over politics 5 years ago. Betty's family only called when they needed money. Patricia's son had moved to California and forgot to invite her to his wedding. Jean's daughter was too busy with her own life to call. We were all variations of the same story. Women who'd given everything, only to find ourselves footnotes in our children's lives. When it was my turn to share, I'd surprised myself by telling the truth. Not the sanitized version, the real one. The wedding where I'd been erased, the night at the bus stop, the 6 months of silence. Betty had reached across and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone, Margaret. Not anymore." And I'd realized something. Maybe this could be enough. Maybe I didn't need Sarah to validate my worth. Maybe these women who understood what it felt like to be set aside could be my family instead. "Maybe we can be family for each other," I'd said. Dorothy had raised her coffee cup. "To chosen family." We'd all clinked our paper cups together, and for the first time in months, I'd felt something like hope. 3 months into my new life, I'd seen a help wanted sign at the local library. Part-time position, 15 hours a week. I didn't need the money, not really. My Social Security was enough to cover my small apartment and basic expenses. But I'd missed having purpose, having somewhere to be, having people who expected me to show up. I'd applied. The interview had been with Mrs. Rodriguez, the head librarian, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Why do you want this job, Margaret?" she'd asked. I could have said something about loving books, about wanting to stay active, about needing extra income. All of those things would have been partly true. Instead, I'd said, "I want to be useful. I want to help people. And I love this library. I've been coming here since I moved to town 30 years ago." Mrs. Rodriguez had smiled. "When can you start?" Working at the library was different than I'd expected. It wasn't just checking books in and out. It was helping people find exactly what they needed, even when they couldn't articulate what that was. The young mother looking for board books that would help her toddler through potty training. The teenager who needed research sources for a history paper but didn't know where to start. The elderly man who came in every Tuesday for large print mysteries and always wanted to chat about his late wife. I learned that I was good at this. Good at listening. Good at finding connections. Good at remembering what people liked. After my first month, a regular patron, a woman named Alice, had said, "Miss Margaret, you always know exactly what I need. How do you do that?" I'd smiled. I pay attention. It felt good to be seen, to be appreciated, to be Miss Margaret, the librarian who always had a recommendation ready. 6 months after the wedding, 9 months after I'd started rebuilding my life, I'd done something I'd never done before. I'd booked a trip, just for myself, a 3-day bus tour to the Grand Canyon. It had seemed impossibly indulgent when I'd first seen the brochure at the library. $289, including hotel and most meals. I'd looked at that number and thought about all the times I'd denied myself things because the money should go to something more important. But what was more important than this? Than seeing something beautiful? Than giving myself an experience instead of just existing? I'd booked it. The morning of the trip, I'd stood in front of my closet, actually excited about what to wear. I'd bought a new pair of comfortable walking shoes and a light jacket. Small things, but they felt enormous. The bus had picked up passengers from several towns. I'd found a seat by the window and watched the landscape change as we drove west. Desert blooming with spring wildflowers, red rock formations rising against blue sky, open space that seemed to go on forever. At the first rest stop, a man about 70 had sat down on the bench next to me. He was tall, with white hair and smile lines around his eyes. "First time to the Grand Canyon?" he'd asked. "Yes, you?" "Fifth. I'm Harold. I come every few years. It's different every time, depending on the light and the season. Never gets old." We'd talked easily. He was a retired teacher, widowed 3 years ago. His kids lived on the East Coast. He'd decided that instead of sitting home alone, he was going to see all the national parks. "Life's too short," he'd said, "to wait for other people to make your adventures happen." At the Grand Canyon, we'd stood together at the rim, looking out at the impossible vastness of it. Layers of rock telling stories millions of years old. The Colorado River, a thin ribbon far below, colors shifting as clouds moved across the sun. "It makes you feel small, doesn't it?" Harold had said, "but in a good way, like your problems are small too." I thought about Sarah, about the wedding, about the months of silence, standing there, looking at something that had existed long before me and would exist long after. Those problems did feel smaller, not gone, not healed, but smaller. Harold and I had dinner together that night at the hotel restaurant. Nothing fancy, just burgers and fries, but we'd talked for hours about our lives, our regrets, our hopes for whatever time we had left. "You know what I've learned?" Harold had said, dragging a fry through ketchup. "You can't make people love you the way you need to be loved. You can only decide what you're going to do with the love you have to give. Give it to yourself. Give it to people who appreciate it, but stop throwing it into empty wells." His words had hit me hard. That's what I'd been doing with Sarah, throwing love into an empty well, listening for an echo that never came. On the last night of the trip, our group had sat around a fire pit outside the hotel, drinking hot chocolate and telling stories. Harold had sat next to me, our shoulders touching companionably. "Margaret," he'd said quietly, "you have a beautiful smile. I bet you don't use it enough." I'd looked at him, at his kind face in the firelight. I'm learning to. When I'd gotten home 3 days later, I'd felt different, lighter, like I'd left something heavy at the bottom of the Grand Canyon and didn't need to carry it anymore. I'd unpacked, made myself tea, and sat on my small balcony. My apartment was on the second floor, and from the balcony I could see the street, the neighbor's garden, and a little bit of sky. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I'd started keeping plants out there, lavender because I liked the smell, tomatoes because I liked growing my own food, flowers because they were pretty and I deserved pretty things. As I'd sat there watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink, I'd realized something profound. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for Sarah to call, not for an apology, not for acknowledgement, not for permission to be happy. I was already happy, right here, right now. With my book club friends and my library job and my plants and my small, quiet life that was entirely my own. "I'm not waiting for anyone anymore," I'd said out loud to the sunset. "I'm living." 18 months after the wedding, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, I was reshelving books in the fiction section when I heard the library door open. I'd looked up out of habit, the way you do when you work in a place like this, ready to offer help. The woman who walked in was visibly pregnant, maybe 7 months along. She wore expensive maternity clothes and had her hair pulled back in a messy bun. She looked tired, stressed, familiar. It took me a moment to recognize her because I wasn't expecting to see her. Not here, not in my library, not in my new life. Sarah. She'd spotted me immediately and her face had flooded with relief and something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear. "Mom." Her voice cracked. "I've been looking everywhere for you." I'd carefully placed the book I was holding back on the cart. My hands were steady. My heartbeat was calm. After 18 months of grief and healing, I'd become someone new. Someone who didn't fall apart at the sight of her daughter. "Hello, Sarah." My voice was polite, neutral, the voice I used with library patrons I didn't know well. "Can I help you find a book?" She'd blinked, clearly not expecting that response. She'd probably expected tears, or anger, or me running to embrace her. "Mom, we need to talk. I've been trying to reach you. Your phone number doesn't work anymore." I changed it. I'd moved past her to the next shelf, continuing my work. "Why didn't you tell me?" I'd turned to look at her then, really look at her. She'd looked older. There were shadows under her eyes. Her expensive clothes couldn't hide the tension in her shoulders. "You never asked, sweetheart." The endearment slipped out from habit, but it felt different now. Distant, like something from a past life. Sarah had followed me down the aisle. "Mom, I'm pregnant." She'd put her hand on her belly. "I'm 7 months along. I need help. Brandon's parents are too busy traveling and I don't have anyone else. I need my mother." I'd stopped walking, taken a breath, let it out slowly. "Congratulations, that's wonderful news." I'd meant it. I was happy she was having a baby, but I'd noticed what I didn't say. I didn't offer help. I didn't ask when she was due. I didn't ask about names or nursery colors or any of the things mothers and daughters talk about. Sarah had noticed too. Her eyes had filled with tears. "That's it? That's all you're going to say?" "What would you like me to say, Sarah?" "I don't know. Something, anything. You're going to be a grandmother." Other patrons were starting to look. Mrs. Rodriguez had glanced over from the front desk, concern on her face. I gestured toward the small conference room we used for tutoring sessions. "Let's talk in here." Inside the conference room, with the door closed, Sarah had broken down. The tears she'd been holding back had come flooding out. "Mom, I'm so sorry about the wedding, about everything. I was so focused on pleasing Brandon's family, on fitting into their world. You didn't think about me, I know." The words had been gentle but firm. True. I was wrong. I see that now. I need you, Mom. I need my mother. Please. I'd sat down at the small table, gestured for her to sit across from me. My daughter, my only child, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, sitting here begging me for help. 18 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. I would have wrapped her in my arms and promised her anything. I would have made myself small again to make room for her needs. But I wasn't that woman anymore. Sarah, do you remember your wedding? She'd looked confused. Of course. Do you remember where I sat? She'd hesitated. At a table? Table 22, in the back, next to the bathrooms. Do you remember the mother-daughter dance? We didn't have... She'd stopped. Realization dawning. Oh God, Mom, I didn't mean... Do you remember telling me to wait at the bus stop? That someone would pick me up? Her face had gone white. Did someone not come? I asked Catherine to arrange... No one came, Sarah. I waited until 2 a.m. Then I walked 3 miles back to my motel. Oh my God. She'd covered her mouth with her hand. Mom, I didn't know. I thought... You didn't think. That's the problem. For 18 months, you haven't thought about me at all. I called, I texted, I sent cards. Nothing. Complete silence. And now you're here because you need something from me. It's not like that, isn't it? I'd kept my voice level, calm. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was? When was the last time you invited me to anything? When did you last acknowledge that I exist? Sarah had been crying in earnest now. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I see that now. Please, Mom, I need you. And there it was. The plea I'd been waiting to hear for 18 months. The acknowledgement, the apology, the need. But hearing it didn't feel the way I'd thought it would. It didn't fill the empty spaces or heal the wounds. It just was. Sarah, I'm not angry at you. And it was true. The anger had burned itself out months ago, leaving only clarity. But I can't be who I was anymore. What do you mean? That woman who gave up everything? Who made herself invisible? Who waited at bus stops in the middle of the night? She's gone, and I don't miss her. So you won't help me with the baby? Her voice was small, frightened. I didn't say that. I'd folded my hands on the table. But it will be on my terms now, when I have time, when I choose to. I have a life, Sarah. I have friends. I have a job. I have things that matter to me. You're not the center of my world anymore. She'd looked shocked, like she'd never imagined I could exist independently of her. I understand if you hate me. I don't hate you, but I don't trust you either. You'd have to earn that back. How? I don't know yet. But showing up 7 months pregnant and asking for help, isn't it? We'd sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, Sarah had wiped her eyes and stood up. I should go. I'm sorry I bothered you at work. Sarah. I'd stopped her at the door. I do love you. I always will. You're my daughter. But love doesn't mean I have to let you hurt me again. She'd nodded, unable to speak, and left. I'd sat in that conference room for a few minutes after she'd gone, collecting myself. Then I'd gone back to reshelving books, back to my life, back to being Miss Margaret who always knew what people needed. 6 months later, 2.5 years after the wedding that had changed everything, an envelope arrived in my mail. No return address, but I recognized Sarah's handwriting. Inside was a birth announcement, simple, elegant. A photo of a tiny baby with a cap of dark hair and unfocused eyes. Margaret Rose Miller, born March 15th, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Underneath the photo in Sarah's handwriting, Mom, she's here. Her name is Margaret Rose. After you. I understand if you don't want to meet her, but I hope someday you will. I'm learning what it means to be a mother now. I'm beginning to understand what I put you through. I'm so sorry. Love, Sarah. I'd held the announcement for a long time, looking at my granddaughter's face, my namesake, Margaret Rose. Part of me felt something warm, pride, joy, the continuation of life. Another part of me remembered the bus stop, the silence, the erasure. I didn't call Sarah. I didn't rush over to meet the baby. I folded the announcement carefully and put it in my desk drawer. That evening, I'd gone to book club. Dorothy had asked how I was doing, and I'd told them about Sarah's visit, about the baby, about the name. "So what are you going to do?" Betty had asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe someday I'll meet her, maybe not." "That's okay," Rose had said. "You get to decide. It's your choice now." Your choice. Those words had felt powerful. I'd gone home that night, made myself tea, and sat on my balcony. The lavender was blooming. The tomatoes were coming in. The sunset was spectacular. I'd pulled out the birth announcement and looked at it again. Margaret Rose. A tiny human I'd never met, carrying my name into a future I couldn't predict. "Maybe someday," I'd said out loud. "Maybe not, but this time I decide." And with that, I'd put the announcement back in the drawer and return to my tea, my plants, my peaceful evening. Because I'd learned something important over these 2 years. You can love someone and still walk away. You can forgive without forgetting. And you can find yourself, even after you've been lost for decades. I wasn't waiting at bus stops anymore. I wasn't making myself small. I wasn't disappearing. I was here, present, whole, living. And that was enough. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, you're not alone. Subscribe for more stories like this, because your story matters too.